Hi, everyone. Welcome to Radiant Living, Inspiring Humanity to Thrive. I'm Marisa B, and today I have with me artist, psychotherapist, Suzette Clough. Suzette has over 5 decades in art and wonderful, wonderful work. I don't want to say too much about it. I'd like Suzette to explain today. Thank you. Welcome for coming and speaking to the audience.
Thank you, Marissa. It's really lovely to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, you're quite welcome. I'm so thrilled. I mean, I love your work. It's absolutely exquisite. And I'd like for you to explain a little bit, because your story is so unique. Could you explain to the audience a little bit about how this all started?
Yes. Well, in a way, I mean, I think my painting journey started when I was 12. And the first time I painted it was when I first went to high school. And my art teacher, called Mrs. Eve, who I really feel incredible kinship and gratitude to, she said, in a kind of, almost like a spell, she said, make a pattern, an abstract pattern. So she gave all the class wax crayons, and the idea was to kind of create a very random pattern and then to put a wash of acrylic paint over the top. And I had never painted before, but something happened in that moment. And it was a bit like, through the paint, I saw the wax crayon appearing, but it wasn't the wax crayon that I'd put down before. It was like it had interwoven with the acrylic paint and it had become changed. And in that moment, I felt like I had a connection to the paint, and it felt like it was a voice. It didn't feel like it was, a painting in the way that we often think about paintings being almost inert. It felt like it became a living thing. And in that moment, it was like, 52 years ago, 53 years ago, actually now, I have not stopped painting.
Wow.
And it's over time, it's changed its role in my life. But it was in that experience that I started to feel that there's a voice there, and I can hear that voice, and that voice can guide me. So from being 12 and becoming a teenager, I just went creative crazy. I was making clothes, printing material, making candles, doing tie-dye, making batik. I mean, I have to just mention my mum at this point, because she was so extraordinary in terms of letting me make a mess, and using her best saucepans and letting me cut up, sort of shoelaces to make wicks for wax candles. So it was like she was very, so profoundly enabling. And that was the beginning of my unstoppable relationship to creativity. And I mean, it's taken many turns since then, but that was my first experience of really falling in love with painting.
And of course, you went to Sydney College of the Arts.
Yeah.
Is that what it was? So you actually went to art school
Yes. Yes.
first.
I did when I was 21. I went to art school. And there were, and before that I trained as a designer and interior designer, but that was not my calling. Straight lines are not my calling. So when I found myself at Sydney College, it was a very extraordinary encounter, because art school it's not like you think it's going to be. It's not like where people, well, my art school wasn't like that. It was not like where people go, oh, that's pretty. It's like, no, actually what they're really asking you to do is delve into yourself, and to go deeper and find out who you really are. So when I was 21, I had a psychotic breakdown, which was both terrifying and has informed the rest of my life. It was 3 years of struggling with very, very intense depression, but also hallucinations. So I at that point I went into therapy, and I started a women's group. I began to sort of, in some way, see that what was coming through me in my own creative journey needed to have a deeper place. And although I did not know what that was, I started to find some of the fragments that would then go on to help me in later as I grew older. And some of it was feminism. Some of it was a deep sort of sense of spiritual connection, because having a breakdown, for many people is a spiritual awakening. And I started to become very, very interested in astrology and also psychotherapy. And I started even at art school to work with people in a halfway house using art as a way of bringing through their stories. So it was like somehow out of this really devastating encounter, my life started to take shape in a way that was very different than I thought it was going to be.
Now, were you still in Australia then?
I was, and so I finished my training in painting and then left Australia when I was in my sort of early 20s and travelled with a couple of dear friends. I'm Australian, so we tend to kind of leave not just for a month, but sort of a few years at a time. I lived in Italy for a while. I lived in the States for a while, and then found myself moving to London, which is where I now live. Yeah.
And that's where you went to train as a psychotherapist?
Yeah, I did. I trained in London as a body-centered psychotherapist, which when I did my training, which was, kind of 30 plus years ago, body psychotherapy was really radical. It was either humanistic therapy or an analytical therapy. So using the body and listening to the body and learning massage as a therapist was a very radical and challenging path. And and somehow during that time, although I painted and made work, it wasn't the main focus. I felt at that point extremely called to learn how to be a therapist. So painting took a back seat, but I was certainly painting. I lived in a warehouse. I had a studio underneath my flat, so it was still there, humming along.
And then you still used art with clients, though, correct? I mean, you were using art with clients.
Yeah, and I worked in a psychiatric hospital with sort of actually using art as an occupational therapist. And then I worked in a 12-step program using art making with women who had eating disorders. And that was deeply formative and was, kind of both challenging and extraordinary. I can see your beautiful cat.
Wants to join the conversation.
They're very welcome. So that was the beginning of no, it wasn't the beginning. It was a way of kind of extending that relationship between art and therapy. And it didn't manifest into something, but I began to have lots of hands-on experiences of working with people and beginning to really see and feel how important it is when you're suffering a deep emotional crisis, that that art making can be a way of contacting the unconscious, and it can be a way of contacting your soul. And that was very evident to me because it was also my journey. It was,
and of course, I know you made a comment that art actually saved your life. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's I think that without art making and writing, I don't think I would be here. I think it was the big meaning maker in my life, and it's also a big passion. It's a big love, and I love teaching about it, and I love working with people around their own creative recovery, and I think when I say art, saved my life, I also think painting is my spiritual teacher, and it has been the most consistent way of understanding my own path. And I just love the language system. I feel so deeply spoken to, in the same way I did when I was 12. It's like the paintings feel to me that they kind of come up as an energetic body, and I feel I'm in conversation with a friend, or I'm in deep communion with something that feels like creation itself.
And you teach, of course, as you just mentioned, you teach.
Yeah, I do. I developed a spiritual creative practice, which I call visual medicine. And
I love that, visual medicine.
That's interesting. I just wrote a post about it today on Facebook, and it's now 21 years old. And I think, like everything for me around creativity, I didn't ever start out going, oh, this is what I'm going to do. It's been an unfolding journey. And the images that come through visual medicine are kind of paintings. I know that looks extraordinarily complex, but it's literally a painting made without a brush.
Oh, wow, without a brush.
Yeah, so the paintings are created by scooping acrylic paint onto watercolor paper. And I think of visual medicine really as a spiritual communication. And I also call it creative mindfulness. And it has many different dimensions. But again, it's like a teacher that teaches us from a position that is never authoritative or punitive or judging or critical. It's the kind of teacher that allows something to come through that is loving, spacious, multidimensional, and doesn't try to make us like everybody else.
Original, and allow you to be original.
Totally. And that word that you used, I think, is very deeply embedded into visual medicine, because in a way it's a practice that takes us back to our origin. And it's not the origin only of you as a child or a baby, or, even through your kinship group. It's the origin of us as stardust, us as energy systems. And so that's the kind of work that I have now, I do with people. And I feel, and, even though it sounds complex, it's weirdly grounding and extraordinarily simple. And when people start to do visual medicine, it's like they have a kind of filmic experience of being taken in to a relationship with, I think, the divine creator. And that voice is never judging, never anything but pure love, even though it might tell stories about very difficult aspects of our soul. So it's not only about creating beautiful images. In fact, it's not about that at all. It's about creating communications, and allowing and learning ways of listening, learning ways of letting the paintings speak, and often about very difficult things.
And so as you said, from a non-judgmental frame.
Yeah, exactly. So they might talk about, you might ask the painting to talk about a difficult relationship, and you might ask the painting that you've brought through, like, why am I having so many problems in a relationship with my partner or my child or my mother or my parent? And what you find coming through is maybe there's a need to kind of find, I'm looking at this image here and seeing it, it's like a set of antlers, and those antlers are also kind of, will take us into a kind of initiation. You might free associate with, oh gosh, that it's a bit like having to become an adult. What part of me needs to incarnate? What part of me needs to find my feet, rather than behaving like a victim or behaving, sort of like in some way going in. But that's not that's not a judgment. When you're in charge
Mm-hmm.
of the information, you might say to the painting, well, how can I do that? Oh God, that makes me feel really a lot of pain.
Mm-hmm.
And so the conversation begins. It's not, and it's unfolding.
Now, do you work in acrylic? This is acrylic work.
It's acrylic work. It's diluted, but what I mean, the images that I've shown you, like they are
Mm-hmm.
so profoundly complex. So,
Mm-hmm.
and often the paintings have many layers.
Mm-hmm.
And what I find happens energetically, it's like a weaving. So you put down one layer and then another layer of paint when the image is dry weaves over the top, and something about those two energetic systems weave together to create something very complex. And you might do that 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 times until it feels like the visual medicine image is kind of, that's it. Now
Mm-hmm.
it's
Yes.
you've gone through many different processes or layers,
Mm-hmm.
which is, that's how an emotional journey is created.
Yes.
It's very, when we think, we've had a breakthrough, it's because we've done, years, decades, lifetimes.
Mm-hmm.
It brought us to that moment where it's like the veil drops, or you feel like, oh, okay, that's what I need
Yes.
to hear, know, see, understand.
Now you teach people, of course, in person, but you also teach online. Is that correct?
It is, and mostly now, in fact, all my work is on Zoom. And I do have a studio in London, and
Mm-hmm.
as well as teaching visual medicine, I'm also a painter. So I make, kind of artwork that in some way follows energetically visual medicine, in the sense that it's about having a relationship as a painter with bigger creational energies. So
and some of your work was on fabric, correct? Because I just was on fabric, large pieces.
Yeah. No, the fabric pieces and my big paintings, can be 3 meters, which is like 10 feet by 6 feet. So they're big.
Yes.
And when I was working with fabric, it's like the studio I worked in was 10 meters long. So that's 32 feet long. So the fabric would be 32 feet long by, sort of 4 foot wide. So I printed thousands of yards and thousands of meters of material. So in that sense, I feel like my painting has, it was like being apprenticed to this bigger energy system. And it's been a long time that I've been doing it. So so
how do you find? Go ahead. You first.
Yeah, so I don't work in person in my studio now. I work online. And
how do you find that? How do you find online? Do the students prefer being online? Because I always have an issue. I mean, as a therapist also, and I use a lot of art, both visual arts and expressive arts, I find that a lot of people want to be present for that. It's almost like they are a bit scattered if they have to do it from their home, or they don't think they have the correct supplies, or they can't get to the correct supplies. Do you find that as well with your students?
It's really strange. I don't. And I've run a lot of groups in person. And it's strange in a way. It's almost like, I mean, I love working in person, but I have found that working on Zoom has allowed something else to happen. It's mysterious, it's magical. I think there's something really important about people feeling confident about being able to set up a small home studio in their own space. So I've developed lots of ways of creating very small, almost like in a small box, you can have a studio. So I use things like I get people to buy lots of shower curtains. And if you have a small space, then you make little containers of paint. And I think it gives people confidence to feel that they can do it, in the middle of the night. They can take charge of the callings of their own artist. Because I think in some way I really advocate around people experiencing their own independence around their artist. So being able to get up when it feels right, I'm going to make paintings now. It might be 3, but I'm still doing it. So they're not reliant on me.
I'm wondering if it's more because most of my clients are coming for a form of therapy rather than
Maybe.
Artists that are taking courses.
Yeah.
And so they have a studio or they want a studio, even if it's small in their home. But I'm wondering if that's what it is, because I feel that they don't necessarily feel that they get as much as when they're in person. But, I'm still trying, because of course, with what's happened in the world, we've had to switch off, and you don't want someone to not be able to continue with the work that they were doing before.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. And I think it's really interesting, sort of what you're saying. It's interestingly, many of my clients are not artists.
Oh, okay.
I find it very difficult often, particularly with visual medicine, to work with people who have art training, because there is a temptation to really over-direct the images, because people want to make them beautiful rather than what they really are is a spiritual communication. And when you know that, what the real art is allowing that to come through, and then the images kind of support the communication. And so it's a bit like unhooking from what they look like, and a lot of artists find that very, very hard. And it can be really difficult to break that habit of wanting to change the painting or wanting to do something to it, when really the painting just wants to come through and bring its own voice through.
It's almost like subconscious work or unconscious work of the student.
Yeah,
that's coming through, where I could see that if an artist would want to manipulate, because right, it would be more a manipulation, either because of training or because of the message that they want to make sure that they get out.
Yeah. And beauty, I mean, it's very, you want your paintings to be beautiful, but often what comes through is something that, to your trained eye doesn't look beautiful, but actually might have an authentic message. So, and visual medicine, even though the images can be, kind of gobsmackingly gorgeous, really, they often, that's not their intention. But beauty is also a path. So it's woven in, and, it's a bit like, braiding sweetgrass. You're sort of weaving with many different things from an unconscious level, as well as things that we've internalized around judgment and the way things should look. And in that sense, the painting is standing in for projections we have on ourselves, or internalized, this is what I should look like, this is how I should sound, rather than a part of us that, when you said that word original, the origin of us wants to come forward, and it might look very different from what we think it should look like.
Well, I mean, also I know that from a therapeutic standpoint, when the client uses art, they're working through things that are very personal. They're working through their own set of issues, their own life. However, that doesn't detract from someone else looking at that art and finding their own answer.
Yes.
Though it may be different.
Yeah.
So there is value in that as well, showing art and because someone can interpret it differently.
Yeah.
And find something in it for themselves at the point at which they're at in life.
Totally. And I think that when the message is coming through, people can feel the message, and I think that what we're talking about is that when someone has allowed themselves to embody the transmission, then it comes through wildly, it comes through organically, it comes through not as a kind of, it comes through unexpectedly. And then that transmission that's wanting to come through the painting, it does something to the viewer. They either, they feel moved, and it could be they feel moved and like, get that away from me, or that makes me feel angry or sad, but nonetheless, there's been an affect. The person feels something.
Well, I always say that art is visceral.
Yes.
It evokes emotions in everyone, different emotions.
Yeah.
But it definitely evokes emotion.
Yeah. And if it doesn't, then it probably isn't art.
Well, true.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
And so now your actual artwork that you do, because you have your own studio that's separate from where you teach.
Yes.
And you said currently you're actually where you teach others.
Yes.
That's the studio that you're at. Now, do you show your work separately as an artist?
I do. I have open studios, and it's interesting. It's a very interesting question, because I haven't, I've been painting for 53 years. I've almost never contacted a gallery. And in some way, I feel my practice, it's not that I keep it secret at all, but it's not, I have sold my work, I sell my work, people buy my work, but I have not shown very much in the gallery system.
Right, in gallery.
And I feel myself now wanting to change that. I feel like something has become much more solidified in me around my own practice. And that's partly where I see that the work I do as a painter, as a fine artist, is really about, I understand now what I couldn't understand 20 years ago, for example, or, that I've been working, really, I see now that I'm working with energetic systems, and that I now have a language, a way of expressing that work that doesn't make me look mad. I now have a way of talking about it that sits within an art historical background, that sits within a body of spiritual and also sort of art critiquing, which I didn't have for many years. So now I feel like that's my next, really my next piece of work, is to actually find ways of actually reaching out of my studio bubble into the world and starting to make contact with galleries, and talk about the body of work I've been working on for 50 years, which is now ready. And if anybody hears this and feels like, you should, I want to just say that sometimes things take a very long time. Sometimes it can be decades before we're ready to actually show something or bring something out, because what we're working with and on might be, very slow in how it's expressing itself. So I want that to be a hopeful message, really.
Right. Don't be discouraged. Really.
Yeah. Don't give up on your painting, because your painting is probably teaching you a lot about a dimension of yourself that can't be pushed and shouldn't be pushed, and needs to sit, as the things that deep, that soul work takes time.
Now, do you also teach art classes that have nothing to do with psychotherapy? Do you teach just strictly students that want to learn art? Do you also have students that are like that?
I don't. I don't, because I think that's not how I think about my own practice. I think I've opened up my practice to share the public piece of work with other people. And obviously I do share about my work when I'm working with students, but I think what I'm working with as a painter, it's like so interior that I don't want to step into teaching about materials.
Right. Structured teaching.
It's not the thing that interests me. What interests me is helping people to find their communication with the creator or the creatrix or the divine. Yeah. And in that way, I'm not that interested in teaching people about, what kinds of medium to use.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
That type of art, that type of teaching of art, of visual arts. And how long do you have an extended course, or so many weeks, or do people come just on a regular basis for how long they want? How do you, especially with your one program that you're doing?
Yeah, I do an introductory course called Painting with the Universe, and that's an introduction to visual medicine. That's 5 weeks, and the groups are like 2.25 hours. And in that, I teach about sort of the physical aspect of how to make the paintings. But visual medicine is also a writing process. So I teach about how to allow the meaning of the paintings to come forward. So I teach a writing process I also developed, which is allows sort of free association to happen through the images. So that process is 5 weeks, and then often people will go on to do another tranche of Painting with the Universe, because it's quite a body of work in that. I'm running a group called Painting with the Dead, which I'll be starting, I think, in January 2024.
Now, how can we get that information out there? I'm sure that my audience is going to ask questions right away.
It will be in the link on my website, visualmedicine.org.
Perfect. So
it has.
I'll put all that in the description. They'll get all of the links so that they can indeed get in touch with you and find out more about the program and join if they like. I think that's wonderful. That's so interesting about Painting with the Dead.
And that's really come through my own spiritual work, but also working with a teacher of mine called Perdita Finn, who's just written an amazing book called Taking Back the Magic, Conversations with the Unseen World. And it ties in with work that I've been doing over the last 25 years, which is a lot of the work I do as a painter is about bringing through energy systems that are verging on extinction. So the kinds of bodies of very land-based paintings that you can see on my painting website, which is SuzetteClough.com.
That's what I was going to ask you. I was going to definitely put that there because I, first of all, a little bit to explain to the audience that I actually have the premiere episode for all my guest speakers. It's almost released privately first. Yes, they are on YouTube, and yes, they are open to the public on YouTube after the fact, but they're released privately through a private Facebook group. And I've posted a number of pictures of your artwork on there, so people can actually see it there as well. But I wanted to make sure that the audience say they hear it when it's open to the public on YouTube, that they can actually go to your website and see your paintings, because they are absolutely exquisite. And they are just the colors and just the emotions that it evokes is just beautiful. I absolutely love it. And now, where can they go somewhere to see your, I know you said you have open studio for yourself, and now you're just starting in galleries.
Well, if you're in London, you can arrange a studio visit with me. But I also wanted to say, Marisa, that I teach people to run visual medicine groups. So I run a facilitated
that's fabulous.
Facilitated training, which is which at the moment I'm running an amazing with an amazing group of women. And so one of my sort of deeper aims is really to teach about creative intelligence and ways of tapping into the creative intelligence that lives in the world. So I feel I've done a lot of work around quantum physics and
Mm-hmm.
its relationship to creative mind, and oracular intelligence and its relationship to creative mind. And
Yeah.
so it really interests me that this dimension of our consciousness that is not often tapped into as artists, that is my mission, to bring that alive. And visual medicine is really connected to that body of teaching that I hope allows people to go into the world and to make links between the living world, our emotional patterns, the quantum world, and these paintings that are being brought through with no brush, with no direction, that just arrive onto the watercolor paper.
That sounds like an absolutely fabulous program, especially for therapists.
It is. It is.
I mean, I'm interested in it myself. It sounds
Yeah.
absolutely wonderful. There's always one more type of modality to offer clients.
Yes. I think what's so amazing about visual medicine is that what it does is, because it's not about skill, you can work with children, 5-year-olds, or and I've worked with many people who've never painted before, but when they step into the field of visual medicine, it is like you feel yourself an artist. It drops all the I can't paint, or I don't like how that looks, because everybody is equal in the field of visual medicine. That field is only about scooping wet watercolor paper into the paint. And so what comes through is completely democratic. It's not to do with 50 years experience, or I went to art school. It's to do with receptivity and learning to listen.
Well, it's quite freeing, isn't it? It's quite freeing to feel that I too can do it. Right?
Absolutely. And that's one of the healing dimensions, that you can do it and you can create hundreds of images. You can do it and you can feel a direct relationship with creation. And it's not about skill. It's about becoming present. And in that, there are many parts of ourselves that we meet that are that disallow that presence, because shame, guilt, anger, pain, they surface as a way of not moving past them, but moving with them. And
it's also quite evolutionary for an individual.
Totally. Oh, yeah, totally. Yeah.
I can see how one would evolve as time goes, as you're working in this in this type of, I guess, non-judgmental creative process.
Yes. Yeah. And I think, what you're picking up on is, I think that it also cultivates love. And I've had people say things like, oh my God, I've got friends now, not just because of the group, but their paintings become their friends. And I recognize that, because for me, through my teenagehood, my creative works were my friends. They were the ones that I turned to say, how am I going to deal with this? Or I'm really in a lot of pain. Or so it's like developing a deck of images that can speak to you.
Exactly, your own personal deck.
Totally.
And now you said that they journal, they write as well. Yes. Is it journaling, or is it different type of writing, or anybody can do whatever they want?
Well, they can. I mean, I'll just show you. Okay, so this is a visual medicine journal. I mean, it's not. I mean, I'm writing and I'm putting pages in. Sometimes there are no words.
Right.
But what I teach about is finding questions that have currency. So if you want to look at why a relationship is not working for you, or what should you be doing next, or why is this happening to me, that's a very, very intimate relationship to have with yourself. but somehow using these words and these images and learning this unfolding kind of way of writing, something happens. And people begin to feel that they're not alone. And then what they begin to feel, and that's where Painting with the Dead comes in, is that these are actually messages. These are actually paintings that are coming from an interdimension. And I don't say that kind of, it's taken me 20 years to get to that. And that's really from observation. It's not from going, I'm going to do that. No, it's come from a lived piece of research, that what we begin to experience is encounters with beings and, sort of images that sit in a collective body that is beyond us.
Right. But it's quite introspective without the fear of being introspective. Totally. Because especially if it's from the collective or often archetypal images that come through that you may not know when they're coming through, right? Until you possibly even sit and reflect upon them.
Absolutely.
And write your personal interpretation. It is very personal. It's very introspective. It seems to be a fabulous tool.
I think it is. It's. I think what it does is interiorize. It gives people a sense of being able to have an inside, and for many people, that's a really difficult. That is really difficult to make contact with your inner voice.
Yes, exactly.
That's both a skill and a life tool that can really serve our soul's journey.
Now, I know you're so busy with everything that you're already doing. Where do you go from here? I know you mentioned gallery work, which is a lot of work, a lot of work. No one realizes how much that is on an artist.
Yeah, totally. Well, I do a lot of writing myself. I write a lot, and so where am I going from here? I'm enrolling the facilitator training program for March 2024, and I'm teaching more courses. But I also see individual clients, but I'm very respectful of kind of this kind of work. You need not to overwork, because what we're trying to do is kind of create a space that allows these resonant messages to come through. And I can only do that when I'm not feeling, like that.
Right.
I am very mindful of how much I work. But having said that, I love working. I really love my clients. I feel deeply moved, like so moved by people's creative recoveries, to a kind of deep feminine connection with themselves and with the world. So I love that. And my hope is that this work will go to more people, and it will spread, and it will really become a tool in a universal toolbox.
Well, you truly are one of the individuals who really love the work you do.
I love
it. And this is a fabulous tool, and I'm sure it will spread. Indeed, it cannot spread. It can't not spread, because it's something that is so healing.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you so much for coming. I know you're so busy, and I so appreciate that you took the time, Suzette, today to come and speak to the audience. Let us know all about everything that you're doing, all the wonderful work that you're doing. I thank you.
And Marisa, I really appreciated our conversation, and thank you for being so spacious with me and letting me speak a lot.
Well, please, of course not. You're the guest speaker. It's fascinating. As I said, I've seen your work. It's spectacular, and I knew that there was a message there, and a universal message, a global message.
Yeah, thank you. And actually, you saying that, it does feel like visual medicine is a universal language. It lives in the body of the world. It
Yes.
is the world. It's not for me, a painter, to have. It's a language that that many people, regardless of their creative ability, in inverted commas, but also physical abilities, it can speak through. It doesn't even have to have you using your hands.
Right. Well, I have to say, I thank you for creating and sharing visual medicine with all of us. I hope that we can have you on again as a guest.
I'd love to. I'd really love to.
Artists are always evolving and work is always evolving. I think that's wonderful. I want to thank you again so much. And you have a wonderful evening, because I know you're quite a few hours ahead of us. But I thank you again, Suzette.
Thank you so much, Marisa. Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.